we're going to turn our attention real quick to Palestine. And if you have this handy, Matt, this is from our friends Daniel Bessner and Derek Davison. You should definitely be subscribing to their Substack, FX. It's a great place to get your international news. But we have this basically report from last weekend. The Israeli.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. The Israeli military bombed Gaza on Monday in response to overnight rocket fire out of the enclave, the third day in a row that particular exchange has taken place. As was the case on the first 2 days, there are no reports of any casualties apart. That this is from efforts to negotiate a more durable Gaza ceasefire, which certainly took a hit this weekend, and that's fine there. So basically Gaza has been under rocket fire again. And people should remember that, just as recently as May, Gaza and Israel were engaged in horrific hostilities that ended up killing over 260 Palestinians, right? And there had been hope that this ceasefire was going to be able to hold off any more bloodshed. But Israel has come back with a vengeance, especially after what has happened in these past couple of weeks with 6 prisoners escaped from a high security prison by digging a tunnel with spoons. Just a really, really amazing story about, human ingenuity, but most importantly, human spirit and the Palestinian fighting spirit that no matter what the odds and the circumstances are, they will always be fighting for freedom. And it's been something that the spoon itself has taken on a role as a symbol. I even saw videos of people in Washington, D.C. at a protest outside of the Israeli embassy throwing spoons.
That's awesome.
Outside of the embassy there.
We've had some good symbols lately between the pencil and now the spoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. And people should know, like the people who escaped were, wide range of charges against them. But I wanted to note that one of them has been held all this time under administrative detention, and we'll get into what that is and why that's a problem very, very soon. But I really wanted to take the time, one, to highlight the heroism of that moment, remind people that Israel is very much, returning to putting Gaza in the crosshairs, and also to highlight what's going on in the prison system in Israel. Which is egregious. Just in response to these prisoners who have left, there has been a campaign that you have to call collective punishment. And we'll get to some of the responses to that in a second. But I want to note that as of now, 4 of the 6 people who escaped from prison have been captured again. They were held without access to their lawyers, without access to communication with the outside world. And just today, one of the lawyers, and if you could pull this up, Matt, this first Al Jazeera piece, one of the lawyers for a Palestinian prisoner has claimed that he has been tortured. The claims basically are that they were held, they were shackled, both arms and legs, to a wall. They were held naked, so sexual humiliation. They were refused water, they were refused food, and they were refused sleep. And that's only one of the people who's been able to meet with their lawyer. There'll be more information coming out soon.
Just undeniably true, right? You can just imagine how much they want to catch these guys and one, punish them for embarrassing them in the first place, but also yes, of course they're torturing these guys.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just want to remind folks of 2 things, right? Let's take them first to this first tweet, Matt, which is what the response is looking like it's going to be. People need to understand that the conditions that prisoners are held in Israel, much like the United States, are abhorrent. They are anti-human, and they are something that should be just fundamentally condemned. And there is a movement right now of Palestinian prisoners to go on hunger strike. This is from Mohammed El-Kurd, who, by the way, this is great news, is now going to be the Palestinian bureau chief for the nation. So congratulations on that.
Very good.
But 13 480. That's the number of Palestinian prisoners who will go on a hunger strike this Friday, protesting the brutal and collective punishment measures implemented by the occupation authorities after last week's historic jailbreak. Our duty is to advocate for their freedom. Absolutely true. And we'll get back to the prisoners and the conditions that they're in, but understand that collective punishment is not just directed at prisoners. Man, if you have this video of what's happened to these children, this is the kind of thing that happens.
So I just want to make sure my DMs are close. Yeah.
This is from the IMEU. And this is a video of children leaving their school because Israeli soldiers have fired tear gas canisters at a Palestinian elementary school in the occupied West Bank, which required around a few dozen children to flee the facility, right? Collective punishment is one of those things. It's not just limited to the prisoners, but we wanted to spend some time highlighting, prison conditions in Israel this evening in support of the people going on hunger strike. So if you have this first one from Al Jazeera, there's this infographic. If you could just scroll down a little bit, I wanted to highlight the amount of people who are in prisons. Here we go. In Palestine, Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. So Israel holds around 4,650 prisoners. 200 of them are children, 40 of them are women, and 520 of them are administrative detainees. And that's it for the graphic there. That's a significant amount of people that Israel's holding. They are held in really brutal conditions. And ever since these people escaped from prison, this high security prison, all prisoners that are held by Palestinians that are held by Israel have faced what has to be understood as collective punishment. That means random searches. That means being moved forcibly from their cells into other areas. There are videos over the past couple of years of people being beaten inside of these facilities indiscriminately while tied down. It's very, very rare that you can get any kind of videos out of these facilities because they are very, very much locked down. Needless to say, this is a place that you don't want to be. This is a place where human rights are abused regularly. And these people going on hunger strike is just a way for them to fight back. And it's important for us in the United States in particular to make sure that we are seeing what's happening there so that we can advocate and put pressure on our fucking government, which is a big part of the reason that this kind of monstrosity is allowed to happen. And I want to hear your thoughts in a second. And there's a place I want to direct people to, a call to action in just a moment. But I did want to note one specific thing that I think some people are not familiar with, which is what these administrative detainees are. Right. These are people who were tried essentially in they don't have to have any charges brought against them. Right. And they can just sit in limbo forever until the military decides that they want to bring up charges against them. This is the most basic violation of anybody's civil liberties, right? This is a basic concept. If you are imprisoned, you are told why you are in prison, and you have the right on a very basic level to have a reasonably timed trial. There are people who have been sitting for decades in these positions, including one of the people who escaped from prison recently. So, absolute solidarity to people on hunger strike. And we need to be putting pressure, one, to end the occupation, but two, to make sure that the rights of these prisoners are highlighted, particularly the ones who don't even have any charges against them. They're just sort of sitting in legal limbo.
Yeah, I mean, like the Guantanamo Bay sort of procedure, just I guess we need to lock people up without any sort of rights. That's a necessity of certain kinds of states these days.
And we'll put this in the show notes, but if you could just go to the call to action, Matt, just to share this with people.
Yep.
This is at damir.com, and this is a call to action. Join Adamir's campaign against Israeli military courts, and it has a few different, I can't read it on the screen here, but it has a few different ways that people can get involved. And and some information about the military court system and why it needs to be abolished. So we'll put a link to there. It has some places that you can take actions and places that you can send letters, emails, etc. If you have some time today, I highly suggest that you do this, because this is egregious abuse of human beings. And the Palestinian people need to always be, covered in, in the public eye, especially in this country, to make sure that we can see an end to the occupation in our lifetime. And as a little preview for later, there's one thing that people in Palestine don't need, and that's fucking Bitcoin.
So the guy who writes these, and we're going to talk about this in depth, but
we're going to talk about this in depth, and I'm sure we'll even do this piece in depth later. But this piece just really sickens me in a lot of ways, and we're going to break down why Bitcoin is a problem and why these kind of things I think are exceptionally egregious. But essentially, these people are arguing that if people who have no other opportunities in their life or in impoverished areas invest in Bitcoin at the right time, then they can make some money. It's really, really sickening, and just sort of shows how perverse that kind of Bitcoin ideology can be. And also, let's not forget that this is like, again, Bitcoin magazine, making these kind of claims. Obviously, they have a motive there as well. But the people in Palestine need your solidarity and your political support in a serious way, not some fucking half-assed technocratic crypto scheme.